Russia's invasion of Ukraine has rocked Europe. Some people are asking, where could be next?
Russia has always been interested in Moldova.
Moldova could be a prime target for Putin's next move, but could we actually see a war here?
Protests, disinformation, destabilization. 3 parts of a hybrid war currently happening in Moldova. Politicians in the country say Russia is targeting them because the government is pro-EU and leans towards NATO. Massive demonstrations like this pro-government one show it is a popular sentiment, and the West has responded, offering support to the country at this summit in Moldova itself, attended by European leaders.
And my message to the people of Moldova is that we stand by you.
But some in Moldova don't like this direction and are trying to undermine it, apparently with support from the Kremlin. And Russia's invasion of Ukraine has got some worried this hybrid war could escalate.
In order to understand why some people fear that Moldova could be Russia's next target, you need to understand both the history but also the geography of the region. This area is the old Soviet Union, basically meaning until the 1990s it was under Russian control. But then early in the decade, the USSR broke up and countries which were once part of the Union gained their independence. Here we have Moldova next to Ukraine, next to Russia. So you've got Moldova, an independent country, but there is an issue. And this is it. This sliver of land in the east of Moldova, bordering Ukraine, is Transnistria. And in 1990, pro-Russian separatists declared this was a breakaway area, essentially saying it was independent. Conflict broke out with Moldova fighting Transnistria's forces, which were backed by Russia. And this wasn't a small fight. Hundreds of people died. Eventually it ended in a ceasefire, but from that point, the issue of Transnistria's autonomy has been a tricky one, because essentially it's in limbo. It's technically part of Moldova, but then Moldova's government doesn't have any control here. And then on the other hand, you have Russia, which has a huge amount of cultural and political influence, as well as a significant military presence, which is something we're going to come back to.
So essentially, the concern is that Russia has a satellite state in between Moldova and Ukraine, with troops stationed there, and that makes people nervous. Could those troops move into Ukraine, or could they support Transnistria in a new war with Moldova? Both are unlikely, but Russia's presence creates that uncertainty, something the Kremlin clearly wants to do.
Russia has always been keen to try and prevent the successor states of the Soviet Union from drawing too closely to the West. So having a base for its troops in Moldova has always given Russia an opportunity to sort of exercise some pressure on Moldova.
If the situation sounds familiar, it's because we've been here before.
This is Crimea, an area of Ukraine annexed by Russia in 2014. While the seizure has its roots in the long history of the former Soviet states, President Putin took advantage of a destabilized government and street protests to make his move. Then, in February 2022, Putin sent in troops again, claiming Ukraine needed to be denazified.
The situation here in Moldova is eerily similar to pre-war Ukraine. Both are former Soviet republics leaning towards the West. Both have eastern flanks controlled by Russian proxies. And Moscow's accused of meddling in politics and trying to spread discontent.
Over the last year, this has become a common sight. These are anti-government protests challenging the pro-Western president, Maya Sandu. Sandu wants to join the EU, and while Moldova's traditionally neutral, the war in Ukraine has led to some new soul-searching about joining NATO. While not everyone's happy about this, Russia's been accused of stoking the anger. For example, the cost of living and a major energy crisis are huge factors in these protests. Moldova is one of the poorest countries in Europe, and since the war in Ukraine, things have got tougher. Russia is a major supplier of gas, but in the last year it's slashed deliveries, pushing up prices.
So all of this has created quite a lot of public resentment, public worry about the situation. And Russia has quite cleverly and strategically tried to exploit that.
The Moldovan government also claimed to have uncovered a Russian-backed plot to overthrow it. In fact, at this protest in March 2023, Moldovan authorities arrested 7 men with Russian ties. It's alleged they were paid by Moscow to stir up unrest. The Kremlin's rejected the accusations. The protest was organised by the Shaw Party, a small political party funded by exiled oligarch Ilan Shaw. He's pro-Russian and has been accused of helping the Kremlin to sow discord.
No one country is supporting those protests. Those protests are supported by the will of the people to change something in their lives and in the life of our country.
In June 2023, a few months after this interview, the Moldovan Constitutional Court banned the Shaw Party, saying it was unconstitutional.
But a different kind of war is already happening here, one involving social media and interference.
So I can show you something very interesting. This is a local politician, a member of the parliament, who's sharing actually fake news.
I spoke to analysts at Watchdog MD who are monitoring how much Russian interference is happening online. They say it's increased tenfold in the last year.
It's pretty worrying to see that these messages, they are very similar to what we saw and we are seeing in Ukraine.
We are not under siege like the Ukrainians are, but we are feeling the pressure even from here, from Chisinau.
So it's that serious?
Unfortunately, even in February last year, nobody was feeling that the reports on Russia attacking Ukraine were real, and they turn out to be scary accurate. Right now, what we are seeing is a situation that is still manageable, but can go either way.
It's claimed the spread of disinformation online and stirring up unrest is part of a hybrid war. But why is Moscow allegedly doing this?
The majority of Moldovans want to move closer to Europe. And that's obviously something that Russia is trying to subvert, trying to prevent. And it's using these sort of hybrid warfare means to accomplish that. Moscow can then say, well, look, it's a pro-European government, and see how that government has run the country into the ground, which obviously is false. On top of that, we also shouldn't underestimate that there is quite a lot of genuine pro-Russian sentiment.
Russian is the second most spoken language in Moldova, and before the war, the country regularly showed Russian TV channels. People seem to lean towards Russia more than the US, with recent polling showing just over a third of Moldovans have confidence in Vladimir Putin, while 26.6% have confidence in the US President Joe Biden. Some also blame President Maya Sandu for the energy crisis. And then there's Transnistria. This rare footage from inside the breakaway region shows just how closely it's aligned to Russia. Transnistria and Russia are one structure and they have to be united, Andrei says. The Russian troops here are our guarantee of safety. While they're here, we are safe, this young woman adds. Around 1,500 Russian peacekeeping troops are stationed in Transnistria. It's also home to a load of Russian weapons. The massive stockpile is based in Kabazna, near the Ukrainian border. It holds thousands of tons of Soviet-era weapons and is one of the biggest munition depots in Eastern Europe. Russia is infiltrating Moldova culturally, spreading disinformation, and has a large military presence nearby. These factors mean an invasion could be possible. But how likely is it to happen?
I think that is, at the moment, I would say, very unlikely. Russia does not have a common land border with Moldova. It would have to cross Ukraine, which obviously is not really feasible at the moment.
Politicians don't seem to be expecting direct military conflict either.
How likely is it, do you think, that Moldova could be Russia's next target?
Moldova's been doing all the right things, but in his arrogance, Putin has attempted to punish Moldova for doing those right things.
Today, Moldova is not facing military threats. Today, Moldova is facing hybrid threats, but we have proved, and our institutions have proved, and our government has proved, that in the last year we can keep the stability in this country, the calm in this country, and the peace in this country.
Ukraine is something of an outlier. Its war with Russia is something we haven't seen in Europe for decades. The conflict in Moldova is different. This isn't Russian troops and tanks coming in. Instead, it's efforts to destabilize the pro-Western government.
The minimum that would be an acceptable outcome from Moscow's perspective would probably be that Moldova remains in this in-between status, so that it doesn't join the EU, that it doesn't join NATO anytime soon.
Much like in Crimea and Ukraine before, Russia has laid the groundwork for making inroads into Moldova. At the moment, experts aren't expecting Putin's tanks to roll in here, but the Ukrainian war has started a new, uncertain time in Europe, a time where anything could happen.